So you picture a king in the Middle Ages. Crown, castle, everyone has to do what they say, right? Well, maybe not. Today, we're going to find out just how much power a medieval king actually had.
Okay, imagine this. You go into work and your boss tells you that you weren't just hired, you were personally chosen by God. That's pretty much what medieval kings believed. It's a little something called the divine right of kings. And hey, it was the ultimate job security. No performance reviews, no HR, just a direct line to the big boss upstairs.
But let's be real. Even if the creator of the universe handpicked you for the top job, what does that actually mean on a rainy Tuesday in November? How much power do you really have? See, that's the big question, because it turns out even a king chosen by God had some pretty serious checks on his power.
And here they are, the big three challengers. It was a constant tug of war. On one side, you've got the king with his crown. But pushing back, you've got his barons, who happen to have all the armies. You've got the church with its own direct line to God. And you've got the powerful pull of custom, the way things had always been done. So yeah, medieval kings were powerful, but not quite as powerful as they like to think.
So, let's start with the theory. To really get a grip on the limits of a king's power, we first have to understand the incredible scale of the power they claim to have in the first place.
Now, what's so important to understand is that this wasn't just some clever political spin. In a really uncertain world, we're talking disease, war, the works. The idea that God chose the king brought a sense of order, of stability. Almost everyone, from the king in his castle to the farmer in his field, genuinely believed it. So to disobey the king wasn't just a crime, it was a sin.
And this belief was made real for everyone to see at the coronation. And this was way more than just a party with a fancy hat. The absolute key moment was the anointing. The archbishop would literally rub holy oil on the king. This sacred ritual was believed to transform a regular man into something more, a sacred figure, chosen and blessed by God himself.
So with God on your side, what could you do? Well, pretty much anything you wanted. You could declare war and make peace. You could just invent new taxes, create laws out of thin air, throw people in prison, and give away or take away huge chunks of land. The power was absolutely immense.
In theory, the reality, as we're about to see, was a whole lot more complicated.
Okay, let's meet the first and most immediate problem for any king, his own barons.
And this really gets to the heart of the problem. On one side, the king always wants more money for his wars and more power for himself. But on the other side, his barons want to protect their money and their rights. And here's the thing, the king needed his barons, desperately. Why? Because a medieval king didn't have a professional army. If he wanted to fight a war, his barons had to bring their knights. If they decided, not to show up, well, no army. And this is exactly what happened with the infamous King John. First, he loses a huge, disastrous war in France. Then, he spends the next 10 years cranking up harsh taxes to try and win it all back, completely ignoring the traditional rights of his barons. By 1214, they just had enough. They rebelled, they captured London, and in June of 1215, they cornered him in a meadow called Runnymede and forced him to sign a document, the Great Charter, or, as we know it, Magna Carta.
This is the crucial bit. For the first time in English history, a king had agreed, in writing, that his power had limits. He couldn't just throw people in jail because he felt like it. He had to follow the law of the land, just like everyone else. This was a revolutionary idea.
All right, on to our next challenger. And believe me, this one was even scarier for a medieval king than a field full of angry barons. You see, the church didn't threaten a king's body, it threatened his eternal soul.
The Pope in Rome held the ultimate weapon, excommunication. Now you have to remember, in an age where people genuinely, deeply believed in heaven and hell, this was terrifying. To be excommunicated meant you were cast out from the church, cut off from God. Your soul was in real danger of eternal damnation. That was way, way worse than losing a battle.
And guess who found this out the hard way? Yep, King John again. He got into a big argument with the Pope over who should be the next Archbishop of Canterbury. What did the Pope do? He placed the entire country of England under an interdict. For 6 whole years, there were no church services. Can you imagine? No weddings, no baptisms, no funerals. The whole country was in a spiritual lockdown. Then, the Pope excommunicated John personally. In the end, John had to give in completely. 6 years, all over one archbishop. That really shows you where the real power was.
So we've got the barons with their armies and the church with its soul-destroying weapons, but there was one more, quieter limit on a king's power, and that was custom.
People just expected a king to rule according to the way things had always been done. A king who ignored tradition and ruled unfairly was seen as a tyrant, and tyrants, well, they didn't tend to last very long. The smart kings like Henry I, they got this. Over 100 years before Magna Carta, he issued his own charter, promising to be a good king and respect the rights of his subjects. He understood the game. A promise will get you a lot further than a demand.
So, what's the final answer to our big question? How much power did a medieval king really have? The answer is enormous power, but held within very real limits. A king was constantly performing this high-stakes balancing act between his own divine authority, the military muscle of his barons, the spiritual power of the church, and the unwritten rules of custom.
Okay, so that's the main story. But the reality of medieval life is just packed with strange and surprising little details that really bring it to life. Here are two of my favorites.
First up, William the Conqueror declared these huge areas of England to be royal forests. This meant that every single deer in them belonged to him personally. So if a starving peasant killed one for food, it wasn't just poaching, it was technically theft from the king. And the punishment for that? Blinding or castration. A writer at the time actually wrote that William loved the tall deer as if he were their father, which probably tells you he liked his deer more than he liked his people.
And here's something that most people just don't know about the most famous legal document in history. King John only signed Magna Carta because he had to. The moment the barons were gone, he wrote a letter to his new best friend, the Pope, who promptly declared the whole thing null and void. Just 10 weeks later, it was dead. The only reason we even remember it today is that when John died the next year, his 9-year-old son needed the barons' support, so his advisors brought it back. The document John tried to destroy became the foundation of English rights because his kids needed it more than he ever did.
All right, you've been listening brilliantly. Now it's time to put all that new knowledge to the test. Let's do a quick quiz. Question 1. What was the divine right of kings? Was it A, the right of kings to own all deer, B, the belief that God personally chose and appointed kings, C, a legal document limiting royal power, or D, the right of kings to declare war?
The answer is B. It was that core belief that a king's authority came directly from God.
Question 2. Why did medieval kings need their barons so much? Was it A, because barons collected taxes, B, barons owned all the land, C, kings had no standing army and depended on the baron soldiers, or D, because barons performed the coronation?
The answer is C. Without a professional army of his own, a king was totally reliant on his barons for soldiers.
Question 3. What was Magna Carta, and why was it so significant? Was it A, a tax document, B, William the Conqueror's first law, C, King John's 1215 charter, the first time a king agreed in writing to limits on his power, or D, a church document?
The answer is C. It was signed in 1215, and it established the principle that nobody, not even the king, was above the law.
Question 4. What could the Pope do to a king that was particularly terrifying? A, remove the king's crown, B, excommunicate the king, cutting them off from the church and salvation, C, send a crusade against the king, or D, confiscate all church land?
The answer is B. In that deeply religious age, excommunication was the ultimate threat, endangering a king's eternal soul.
And our final question. What is the best summary of a medieval king's power? Was it A, total and unlimited, B, very little power, C, enormous power within real limits from the barons, the church, and custom, or D, only as much as Parliament allowed?
The correct answer is C. Kings had huge amounts of power, but it was a constant balancing act against those three major forces.
And that's all for now. Join us next time when we look at the most powerful institution in medieval England. And hint, it was not the king. We'll see you then.